Yeah, okay. My name is Soojin Kim. Thank you for invitation. I'm happy to show my small opinion about Plato's image, but my English speaking, as you now see, is terrible. So my presentation read, Dr. He, can I make public this, my paper?
Yes,
Moment.
Yes, we can see the document.
Did you take my paper?
Yes, we can see your Word file right now.
Yeah. Can you see?
Yes.
Okay, I start. Moment. This study aims to uncover a positive value of the image presented by Plato by exploring the cause of the image produced by the sophist of the dialogue sophist, and by analyzing the analogy of the divided line in the Republic. In the sophist, guest of Elia and Theaetetus define sophist as the creator of images and ask and answer what the image is. In this process, the image is defined as being and simultaneously non-being. In this way, the image has a relationship with its opponent. In other words, the image cannot appear in the horizon of absolute non-existence excluding existence, and in a single existence horizon without non-existence. This is because such a single world cannot allow its outside. So the coexistence of being and non-being is impossible. In other words, the image only emerges on the basis where being can exist as non-being, that is, under the horizon where being and non-being coexist. So, that being and non-being coexist, what does that mean? To answer this question, we will look at the discussion of firsthood in the sophist. This is because in the sophist, a first statement appears as a place where being and non-being coexist. Plato suggests the possibility of a first statement by telling that a first statement is created when being is defined as non-being, or when non-being is defined as being. And the occurrence of this first statement is explained in relation to the operation of the soul as follows. A. Our souls produce dianoia, doxa, and fantasia in the form of true and false. Dianoia is a silent conversation with oneself in the soul, and logos is a voice flowing out of the soul. Doxa is a result of dianoia in the soul, and fantasia comes from a mixture of perception and doxa. First statements as images are produced through the mixture of a result of dianoia and perception in the soul. In other words, the image produced by the first statement of the sophists arises in our soul, and perception is intervened in the result of dianoia in the soul to generate the images. This means that our soul is the place or basis of coexistence of being and non-being. And furthermore, it means that this intervention produces the image which non-being is defined as being. And this view suggests that perception can be intervened in the level of dianoia located in the intellectual world, and that dianoia also can be intervened in the visible world in the analogy of divided line in the Republic. Then, in what way do the intellectual world and the visible world relate to each other? To answer this question, let's go to the analogy of the divided line in the Republic. Plato divides the world into a visible world that can be perceived by our eyes and an intellectual world that can be viewed through the eyes of the soul in the analogy of the divided line in Republic. And he defines these two distinct worlds as doxa and noesis from the point of view of this state of awareness. The objects of the two worlds divided are again divided into two. The visible world is divided into real objects and their images, and the intellectual world is divided into the realm of forms and the things of the anoia, such as shape, geometry, and arithmetic. Furthermore, according to the clarity of the awareness, Plato divides the visible world into eikasia and pistis, and the intellectual world into episteme and dianoia. In this way, in the analogy of the divided line in Republic, the level of its object and the state of awareness are clearly separated. And because of this clear distinction, the objects of the visible world as things and images and the object of the intellectual world as forms and mathematics seem to be irrelevant to each other. However, as stated earlier in the dialogue Sophist, Plato showed that the anoia can produce doxa as a result of her own, and that even the perception of visible beings can be involved in the anoia. How is this possible? Let's take a closer look at Plato's view of the anoia in Republic. Plato presents mathematical things such as geometry and arithmetic as an example to explain the anoia. According to his explanation in 510b, the anoia is not a way of going from hypothesis to arche, but to conclusions. The way is to make hypotheses about what they already know, such as odd, even, and figures, which everyone considers to be obvious, and proceed consistently without contradiction to the object they were exploring in the first place. For example, mathematicians who conduct inquiry in the way of the anoia start their own inquiry by hypothesizing the figure itself, which everyone believes to be obvious, in order to serve their task. In the process of this inquiry, they develop their own argumentation using images of figures. And they recognize that the image of the figure they use is not the same as the figure itself. And they only fix and use the figure itself as a tool. In this way, because they imagine figures themselves, they seem to explore something itself, like Plato's idea. However, it is not something itself as an idea, because it is not truth, but just a hypothesis that everyone already knows. In addition, in 533c, Plato explains that mathematicians in the inquiry of the anoia are not aware of the hypothesis that they established, because they cannot explain logon didonai this hypothesis. In this way, they have no knowledge of the hypothesis they use. In other words, although mathematicians assume and discuss the figure itself, they themselves do not explain what the figure itself is or why the figure itself exists, because they do not proceed to a first principle, arche and hypothetos, from the hypothesis they have established. Thus, the inquiry in the anoia presupposes what they do not know as truth or being, and produces other conclusions under this premise. In this way, although the anoia lies in the intellectual world with episteme, it serves on question from hypothesis without knowledge. In other words, Mathematicians in a state of dianoia are no different from doxomimetike. It is imitators without knowledge, like the sophist described in the Sophist. What on earth should we understand the object of dianoia as? To answer this question, let us now explore dialectic as opposed to dianoia. According to 510b, dialectical inquiry proceeds from the hypothesis that was the starting point of the dianoian inquiry to a first principle. And at this time, based on the hypothesis that was the starting point of the dianoian inquiry, dialectical inquiry proceeds towards the principle of once one by using only the forms themselves, not images. In addition, dialectic inquiry ensures certainty by discarding uncertain hypotheses one by one in the process of going upward. In other words, in order to obtain true knowledge from tentative or provisional hypotheses that are not yet truths, they never use the image of the visible world, but go step toward the fundamental principles. And after seizing on a first principle at the end, that is, idea of good, from it, using only the forms, they go down the direction of the dianoian inquiry. And only then do we come to true knowledge or episteme. As such, dianoian inquiry envisions or imaginates something like the square itself and the triangle itself, but it cannot acquire true knowledge due to the lack of knowledge of the first principle. And only dialectical inquiry can proceed to true knowledge. However, it can be said that the dialectical inquiry also starts from the tentative knowing, not the sure knowing, in that it starts from hypotheses without knowledge. It only proceeds toward hypothetos without using images of the visible world. Thus, a hypothesis that everyone considers to be obvious but not yet known if it is true is the starting point for both the downward dianoian inquiry and the upward dialectical inquiry. As we saw earlier, the starting point of the dianoian inquiry and the dialectical inquiry is the same. And the hypothesis, which is the starting point, is not yet true knowledge, as it has not yet reached a certain knowing, although everyone considers it to be obvious. However, in order to obtain true knowledge under these hypotheses, the dialectical inquiry have to use only forms without using visible images, such as triangle images and square images, and have to go toward hypothetos, that is a first principle of hypothesis that everyone considers to be obvious. And only then can we face the world of ideas, the truth. But this means that in order to move on to idea, we have to start the inquiry from what everyone knows to be obvious. In other words, what everyone considers to be obvious, but not knowing whether it is true or false, that is a state of doxa, this is the first step towards idea. Plato in the Sophist defines the sophists as people with the skill of making things that look alike, claiming that they produce images, and he defines the first statements they produce, that is images, as things that perception is combined with the result of dianoia, and accuses the sophists as imitators of truth without knowledge. However, as we have seen in the analogy of the divided line in the Republic, both the dianoian inquiry and dialectical inquiry of the intellectual world start from a hypothesis without knowing. Even the Anoyan inquiry discovers new things by using the triangular and square images of the visible world. And we find out the things that everyone can consider to be obvious among those new things and use them as a basis to move on to the principle of all things, or arche anhypothetos. In this way, for Plato, the world of images, which is the world of doxa, can make us stop or remain in the world of images, or can lead us to the world of ideas, depending on how we explore it. This means that images are not considered worldless by being treated as irrelevant to the path of truth, but as a first step towards truth. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for that very concise and clear presentation. So it's time for questions. Yes, Mr. Lena. Mr. Lena, Zenek Lena, yes, go ahead.
Sorry, I just thank you for this talk. I just upload actually. I don't.
Okay. Mr. Touch.
Okay, thank you very much for your interesting talk. I will keep my question very short. At the beginning, you said that the soul is kind of the place that combines being and non-being, and that therefore becomes the place of falsehood, so to speak. And you connected that place of falsehood with the terms of dianoia, doxa, and also fantasia. And I wanted to question whether your claim entails the point that in turn, noesis, that means approaching the forms, and aistesis, regarded as such, are not fallible, are infallible, and are as such not false or cannot become false. Is that also a consequence you would affirm?
Oh, sorry. One more.
Okay. You had. At the beginning, you said that soul is the place that combines being and non-being, and that there is therefore it is the place of falsehood, which is obviously true. We can state a false statements if we say Theaetetus flies, for instance. Mm-hmm. And my question is now: you combine that with the terms of dianoia and of doxa, which of course can both be false in the sense you demonstrated. And I wanted to ask whether noesis, which is a higher, and aistesis as such, if we want to term it, cannot become false, or if that is not entailed in your claim.
Okay. Right. However, if there is a result within the activity of dianoia, I think that it can be put into the realm of this activity in a broad sense. And in that way, if dianoia's activities are placed in the realm of intelligence and dianoia's results in the visible world, in analogy of the divided line in the Republic. So dianoia cannot produce anything at that stage, but this doesn't fix in text. Comment?
Okay, thank you.
So, other questions? Please don't hesitate to raise your hand. Professor Dominique O'Meara, maybe, do you have any questions? By the way, we are very honored to have you with us.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes. Thank you very much. I think I have to read this paper quietly. later on to meditate on it. I can't immediately react to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So if you don't have further questions, our panel is now over. We have a break time now. Thank you very much for coming here. You can join the next panel after 50 minutes. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.